Thanks for having me. So I have enormous amounts of slides and just a little bit of time. And so you're going to hear me go quickly. In fact, I'm going to set my timer right now and make sure that I'm monitoring myself as I speak. I'm excited to be here with you today. I have brought my Coke Zero. I have a little cough, and so I will drink that. I was going to pour it into a coffee mug to look like I was really cool, but I decided to just be authentic. So that's me. This is the only thing I have to disclose at the time, that I am a parent of children who have had prenatal exposure. My youngest son had a lot of prenatal exposure to a lot of different substances, including alcohol. My oldest son was just opioids, or that's what he tested positive for at birth. But I have a lot of experience, and I think this picture perfectly describes what it's like. I relate to Michelle in so many ways, and parenting a child who has some behavior challenges, and certainly I can relate, Michelle. So today we're going to talk about, I'm going to help us to describe 2 common language or cognitive effects of prenatal exposure, identify some impairments in social communication and executive function. We'll spend some time talking about executive function. And then I'd love to get to some strategies to support children with vocabulary development and also some of their executive function skills during play. So we'll talk about some fun and effective strategies, or I think they're fun. I will say, because I have so many slides, I want to give you guys a little warning that I'm going to sail through some things that I think we've already covered in the series. And this is one slide here that I'm just going to sail through. We know NOWS is a problem. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't. Here are some numbers to support that, right? I did want to move into, from that, a quick review of what speech language pathologists do. And I'm guessing that most of us know, but it'll be a good review to think about the differences between speech sound disorder, which is really how children say their sounds, so their intelligibility, they're saying a lot, but we might not understand them as much, which I feel after I was in Michelle's group, it sounds like maybe something that her son was having difficulty with. There's also receptive language disorders, and this is understanding, and expressive language disorders, which is expressing. And within those, we have semantics, which is vocabulary, syntax, how words are put together, and then pragmatics, the social use of language. And so we will talk about in just a second some strategies for supporting, especially vocabulary. And then the great mystery here of executive function, which I'm going to talk about in more detail in just a little bit, but speech language pathologists are involved in helping children with executive function. And we will see in just a little bit how closely tied executive function is to our social skills in our kiddos. So I'm moving fast, I apologize. I want to talk with you about what we know from research about what happens when kids have been prenatally exposed to opioids in their later language development. But there are some caveats about what we know. Excuse me, I do not have COVID. I just have this crazy tickly cough. But what we have studied, when we look at the research that's out there, we have to look at it with a close eye, because there are a lot of confounding variables that play into, why this is difficult to study. First, a lot of kids who've had prenatal exposure are also are having adverse childhood experiences as well. And so I put a link here. If you've not watched the TED Talk by Nadine Burke-Harris, I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful TED Talk talking about how children who've had adverse childhood experiences are often have later poor health outcomes, and not just, academic, we know these kids are going to have some academic issues, but poor health, like heart disease, diabetes, like really some sad news there. So anyway, so adverse childhood experiences play into how we study this child's cognitive development, and we can't necessarily say, oh, this is just the opioid exposure alone. This next point, exposure to a variety of substances, is something that I think about a lot because of my son's exposure to a variety of substances. He was exposed to lots of different drugs, including opioids, prenatally, but also alcohol, which can be very detrimental. And it's difficult sometimes to parse out, like, oh, that's the opioids. That's, it's hard to study because a lot of these kids have had lots of different types of exposures. We think about poverty too. Poverty is a risk factor for having language learning issues. And then the genetics, what's the kid come to the table with as far as, especially if we're talking about executive function, coming to the table with some ADHD stuff genetically, right? So anyway, all these factors kind of confound when we're looking at language. So as I'm looking at the research around language development in children who've had opioid exposure, I have to think about all of these different confounding variables. Which leads me to my next point, is that this is so hard to study. And so, and the studies that are out there must not have included a speech pathologist on their team, because they're using some very general language measure, like the Bailey, like this, and it might not be sensitive to the changes that we may see in children who've had opioid exposure. So if you are a researcher, I'm sure there are some of us that are out there, please consult with your speech pathologist if you want to study language outcomes, because there are many more sensitive measures that are available so that we can look closely at what happens with language with children who've had opioid exposure. So I did want to say that. So I'm going to go through some I pulled them out as like, oh, these are important studies to think about. But just know in the back of your brain here that there's not a lot of research in this area, and we need a whole bunch more. So if this kind of floats your boat, jump on my bandwagon, because I love to look at this stuff. What we do know is that the environment is critical for early language development. And so Beckworth and Burke found that children who go home with a biological parent tend to have worse language outcomes than those who come home with a foster or adopted parent. I'm in no way advocating that children should not go home with their birth parent based on this research. But what I am advocating for is those of us that are in this room together, Zoom's call together, that we have a obligation to talk to parents about reciprocity and communication and the importance of that in early development, and training birth parents about the bonding, the attachment, and the reciprocity with communication. So it is very important. Our role is very important, and we can have a big impact on children. I'm so sorry that my cough is annoying. Hunt in 2008, and they used the Bailey here. So they used the Bailey, which isn't as sensitive as some other measures, found significant differences in receptive and expressive language scores of those children who had been prenatally exposed to opioids compared to children to a control group. So these children, are demonstrating some language delays, and those can have a big impact on later development and later academic achievement too. And I think all of us know that, especially the speech pathologists in the crowd, that these kids are on our caseload and we know about it. It's just that the research hasn't really caught up to what we're doing clinically with these children. Now, I found this study, this was in 2004. I found it pretty interesting, and we're going to talk about addressing vocabulary in just a little bit, but Chang and colleagues found that children who had prenatal methadone exposure actually had difficulties with word retrieval, and they had lower vocabulary scores. And this researcher followed them through 16. And so we do see that children are missing a lot of vocabulary or having word finding difficulties as well. And in a little bit, we'll talk about some strategies to help children gain some vocabulary skills. We also know that the children who have been exposed have difficulties with academic achievement, and that can be related to delayed general cognitive function at 3. You can see that's an older study, but it certainly is worth looking at. And this is the idea of the rich get richer and the poor get poorer with language. So children who come to the table at school and they've got this really rich vocabulary and they're they're strong language, they're going to get those reading skills and they're going to get that academic achievement and they're going to achieve. And the children who come with a little bit less language skills, they're not going to achieve as much. So we can see that early language and literacy play a huge role in academic achievement. And that's why, you know, I feel like this Ornoy study is, you know, coming into play here. Why are they having difficulty with reading and math? Reading supports math, literacy or language supports reading. We do know that those children are having some more difficulty. This is the piece that Michelle knows really well. I know really well as a parent. The children who've had prenatal exposure have a struggle with behavior. They're often diagnosed with ADHD, conduct disorders. And they're more than likely to be diagnosed with anxiety, emotional disturbances, and even autism. And we see a lot of aggression in children who have had a prenatal exposure. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second when we talk about about the executive function weaknesses that these children have. As far as educational outcomes, I know that there are some educators in the audience. I was kind of checking you guys out to see who my audience was today. I really recommend this. The study was published in 2018, not 1918. That would have been a long time ago. It talks about educational disabilities among children and like their classifications and how they were classified when they got to school. And I thought it was pretty interesting. You might find it interesting as well. But children with NAS are obviously more likely to be referred for a disability evaluation. That's what we recommended for Michelle, right? They're also more likely to meet the criteria for disability and to require classroom therapies and services. Usually they're diagnosed with some in preschool developmental delay and or speech and language impairment. So I thought that was an interesting study. It's relatively new, and you might be interested if you are working in a school and checking that out. So let's talk a little bit about executive function because it plays into to language and a lot of the issues that children who have prenatal exposure experience. This dog is demonstrating excellent executive function, right? He's got all his bones, he's lined up. Inhibitory control on this dog is amen, like A1 positive here. But in the area of executive function, we really think about three different things: working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. I'd like to talk through those just a little bit with you and talk a little bit about some of the issues that we may see in children who've had prenatal exposure in those three areas. The first is working memory. Working memory is critical for language development, and there's a reciprocal relationship there, certainly. But working memory, just a little refresher, I know we probably all have had this in our Psych 101 class, but it's the ability to hold information in our head and manipulate it in short periods of time. So we think about this skill supports children in learning to read, like they have to decode, they have to they have to hold the puss sound in their head, then think of the next sound, but they also have to think about that word that came before so their whole sentence makes sense when they're decoding. So it's a highly needed skill in development and supports language and literacy. It's sometimes children coming to the table having difficulty learning to read may have issues in their working memory. One point that I put here is their ability to, children who've had prenatal exposure, or actually a lot of children, not even with prenatal exposure, who are struggling with following multi-step directions. So especially without reminders, I tend to bark at my kids, like, get your coat, grab your shoes, put them on, meet me at the van. I'm giving them like 3 or 4 instructions, and then I often like frustrated when they're not following through on things. And this is something that we might want to bring up to our parents in making sure that we're giving instructions in clear, concise a manner, that we're using 1, 2-step directions, scaffolding them to more 3 or 4-step directions, but that we're making sure that the kids are understanding and they're not willfully disobeying, because that's one piece that I have to check myself on too. Like, I just barked like a whole bunch of stuff really quickly at my kids. I need to stop and check myself. In social interactions, working memory can come into play with the child's ability to come in, take turns in the group, follow the group, keep on what's going in a game or in some kind of social interaction. It can be difficult for kids. I posted here, and in each of the next few slides, I wanted to make sure that you are aware of the developingchild.harvard.edu website, which includes a wealth of information about supporting executive function in young children, and also supporting executive function in parents of young children, which can come into play with our early intervention providers that are in the audience too. So that's just a little side note for you. Inhibitory control. I love this example. Hopefully you're seeing these dogs here, that this dog steals all that, he has no inhibition. A lot of times our kids who've had prenatal exposure definitely struggle with inhibiting an immediate reaction. My children have been dismissed from multiple daycares. Like now I have like I'm a pride, like, I don't know, I don't even know the count of how many daycares that they've been dismissed from. And a lot of it relates to this idea of inhibitory control, stopping themselves from that initial reaction. So like probably just a lot like what you have experienced, Michelle, of, your child has a thought, has experience, and it acts on that thought. So this prefrontal cortex is not lighting up a whole bunch. It's an immediate amygdala fires and I respond. This also comes into play when we're talking about speech and language, especially with social communication, in inhibiting speech. Because a lot of times our kids, you think, oh, a kid with a language disorder, they may be, quiet and they're not speaking a lot. That's not the truth in a lot of cases with kids, especially kids who have ADHD. They can't inhibit their speech. They're talking too much, and their friends aren't liking that they're talking so much. My son this morning, he woke up, I had something going in the microwave, and he started narrating. He was like, the microwave's going, something's in the microwave, I'm not sure. Did you hear that beep? It's like he can't even inhibit. What was going on up here was coming out of his mouth. And that can play an important role in making friendships, because sometimes you need to keep your thoughts up here, right? Ignoring distractions, staying on task. That's probably where, you are, Michelle, right now with your son. Like he's at home. There are 5 million distractions. Staying on task can be, a huge barrier for kids during this COVID-19, even typically developing kids. But inhibitory control is a huge area. I'm so trying not to cough. Is a huge area for children who are who've had prenatal exposure. And I am moving quickly. I'm not going to cover this slide, but it is something that I thought if you have extra time today, go to YouTube and type in the marshmallow test for preschoolers. It's a way that researchers look at inhibitory control and its development over time. And it's really some cute videos of kids, they're offered a marshmallow and they say, you can eat this marshmallow now, or if I give you 2, but I will give you 2 if you wait a little bit. And so it's fun to watch the little kids, contemplate, am I going to eat this marshmallow or not? So I won't talk a lot about that, but I did want to mention, and with typically developing kids, even even at 3, sometimes even at 4, and they're still developing this skill, right? We do see some change between 3 and 4 years old. But children who have had prenatal exposure, maybe not so much. My experience and working with my own children and working with other children in this area is that typically around 2 or 3, everybody's like, oh, you know what, this kid's okay. Their language is okay. Their sensory, they're okay. They're doing okay. And then they get to be 4 or 3.5 or 4, and they're still doing some behaviors that they should have stopped doing, right? So they're still biting, they're still hitting when they're angry. And I think a lot of it is related to this inhibitory control is not coming into play. We would expect a 4-year-old to not bite when he's angry. This last thing about cognitive flexibility, and the second that Michelle started her case, I was like, oh, her son is like my son with cognitive flexibility, and working from home requires enormous amounts of cognitive flexibility. I think about myself and how flexible I have to be in my own work environment here at my house. And it taxes my system, which I think is pretty intact. I'm neurotypical. We think about cognitive flexibility as that ability to switch gears between tasks, flexibly. We also, and when we talk about cognitive flexibility and we're talking about social communication, we're also thinking about perspective taking, because I can think of my thoughts, right? That's easy for me to do. But for me to think flexibly, I also have to think about your thoughts. And so you can see how cognitive flexibility, inhibitory control, all of these kind of come into play together. And it's hard to kind of parse them out. But this piece here is an essential piece for social communication. So if a person is cognitively flexible, if a child's cognitively flexible, they can learn exceptions to rules to grammar. So we may see children who lack cognitive flexibility or this executive function skill may also, have some grammatical things as well. Trying new strategies when something's not working with a child, with another kid. My son, he has one way to ask somebody to play. They say no, and he comes right back at him the exact same way. He doesn't have a different way. Like he's not taking perspective and saying, well, maybe if I appeal to this side of him, he'll come out and play. He just uses the same strategies over and over. And so that piece is difficult. In a few minutes, I would like to talk with you about ways that we can build cognitive flexibility in preschoolers by using, it sounds counterintuitive, but by using pictures to support their play, and then alternating and adding to those pictures. So we know that children who have strong executive function skills go on to have strong academic achievement. And I would argue, a lot of time in preschool, we're focused heavily on those early literacy skills, and as we should be, right? I'm all about early literacy skills. I study that. I'm interested in that. But I would argue, since I've had my children, that supporting executive function in preschool is probably more critical because it's such an important task for later achievement, later social skills, all of those wonderful things that make up being a good human and what we want children, to grow into. Supporting this in preschool can be a very essential thing. And that's in my opinion. If you have another moment today, I would urge you to go and watch Cookie Monster's video about executive function and self-regulation too. So he's kind of funny. There is a reciprocal relationship between language and executive function. We could argue the chicken egg debate here, what's more important in this situation, but inhibition, working memory, cognitive flexibility are important for acquiring later language, but you also have to have that inner speech, right? That guides your cognitive processes. So we've got a circle here that's constantly moving. We have, oh gosh, I'm talking so fast. I'm sorry. I'm addicted to Coke Zero. So I'm going to take a Coke Zero break here and say, we have evidence that executive function and social skills are highly interrelated. And so when we're working on social skills, we're working on executive function, and we're working on executive function, we're working on social skills. It's important, they both predict later academic achievement, and they're found in children who are resilient. So I'm gonna slide through this slide if you don't mind.
Sorry, Lesley, this is your time.
Yeah. My 10-minute warning? Okay, I gotta go fast. Okay, so this executive function, social skills, these are the areas that we would expect children, that what they need to be successful here. You'll see this book, Your Kid's Gonna Be Okay. If you get a book for a parent, give them this book. Even if they don't read it, they need to see that title every single day. So tell them to stick it out on their nightstand, because they're gonna read that title every single day. We want children to have, I've highlighted in red these areas that I think are critical for our children who've had prenatal exposure. This is what they struggle with the most: perspective taking, consequential reasoning, immediate emotional reactivity to emotionally charged events, and that communication reciprocity can be very critical. So I'm going to keep on sliding. For any intervention to be successful, we need, a child needs, our intervention needs to be designed so that, the child can experience success. And here are some intervention designing kinds of principles. They need repeated opportunities to practice whatever the target is. So when you're setting up your intervention, you're going to want to make sure that the child has opportunities to practice that over and over and over. It needs to be intensive. So you're not just practicing it once and then not addressing that goal for another 2 months. We have to be systematically supporting the child. So we know where we are right now and then where we're going, and we have a path to that goal. And we need to be explicit with kids. And this last one, I am gonna say something about. I feel like we don't do kids justice in telling them what we're working on. So when I'm talking to kids and I have some vocabulary words for them, I tell them, here's your vocab. These are the words that I want you to learn today. Just like I told you, these are the 3 things that I want you to get out of this session with me. That's an important piece that you got to know what you're working on. So tell kids what you're working on, and then I add functionality there. Make sure that whatever we do is functional. And we're going to want kids to feel successful, especially these kids to feel successful. Michelle, I'm looking at you. Luckily, you're on. I can see you here, so I'm pointing to you. You don't know that, but that our kids have to feel like they're good at something, right? So it's that self-esteem booster. So we want to make sure when we're designing interventions that we're picking things that they can be good at. Okay, let's build vocabulary. So for those non-speech pathologists in the audience, my speech pathologists probably know this. We can divide vocabulary into tiers. And the tier 1 words are things that happen, just, regular old words, right? Food, car, things that we use like a lot. And most kids, know those words. I mean, there are children who have severe language delays, no, that would be something we would address, but most kids. Children who have language delays, we may, and we will be, not may, we will be focusing instead on tier 2 vocabulary. And these are high frequency words, and they appear in a lot of text. So they're also high frequency, just like our tier 1 words, but they're less likely, and children are less likely to know their meaning. So I love this book, Llama Llama Mad at Mama. I like books that are tied to emotion, especially when we're working with children who've had prenatal exposure. And I chose the word aisle here. So, great big building, great big signs, lots of aisles, lots of lines. And so if I were to choose my vocabulary from using this book, I might choose the word aisle. That's like more of a tier 2 word. A tier 1 word might be cart, but a tier 2 word might be aisle. Those are important. Tier 3 words, those are stuff that, they're going to learn in their science texts. They're very, very context dependent, but our focus is going to be on tier 2. I want you to hopefully find books that you can find tier 2 vocabulary words for, and pull them out for the parents that you're working with or for the teachers that you're working with, so that they can address them. We know that it's important to talk. If you're building vocabulary, talking and lexical diversity matters. So you may want to give parents, if you're working with them, or other teachers, you may want to give them these like examples here. Like what would it look like to really be rich in your communication with a child and building their vocabulary versus what's just maybe a more average communication exchange. How can we build that? So I do find it important to share these examples with parents so they know what you're talking about when you mean, I want you to be, I want you to talk to your kid, everything, you're narrating everything. Provide semantically contingent responses to children. So I've got an example of that here. A child says, I hurted myself. We might want to give this example to the parent. Instead of saying, no, you hurt yourself, which I think a lot of us may do, right? That's okay. Instead, we're going to give that semantically contingent response where, oh, you hurt yourself. May I see where you hurt yourself? How did you do that? And in a way that you're correcting that child's communication, but not in a very explicit manner, like, no, you hurt yourself. It's semantically contingent. And those kind of responses build vocabulary. Moving and moving. Vocabulary, interactive reading, so important for vocabulary. Read as often as you can. And for children who have language impairments, read repeatedly, the same text repeatedly. Provide an example. So an aisle is like the rows that we walk down in the grocery store. That's an aisle. So provide that explicit definition of the novel words when you get to them when you're reading in the book. Make sure that your reading is interactive. There's some trainings on dialogic book reading. Compensatory using visuals. Okay, I'm like looking at my time here, and I'm wasting time looking at my time. We've got visuals here. So make sure that we're including picture schedules. I mentioned to Michelle, I love the lessonpix.com, and it's PIX if you're interested. It's like a $38 a year subscription, and it's fantastic. It's taking over Boardmaker for me. I'm like, Boardmaker's like this, and LessonPix is this. I love it. So we make sure that we're using picture schedules. And I tell speech pathologists especially, make sure that you're starting with parents or teachers in a way that it's going to be used. So don't bust out a 10 picture schedule, thing and put it at the door. You know, I want the parent to feel successful with it. So I may be starting with 3 steps. And maybe it's around bedtime, something that I know that they can use effectively. Some visuals to help children with that response inhibition with speech might be a stop and go sign too. I'm talking so fast. I'm sorry, you're probably like, I can't follow you, lady, but pictures of an ear and mouth might also help children with that as well. You may, if you were in a circle time, place thought bubbles next to each kid, maybe laminated thought bubbles that they can stop and put their thought on the bubble. And you're providing practice with this as well. So I wish we had more time so I could talk with you about this, but play sequence visuals are I love this. I love to encourage cognitive flexibility in children by encouraging play. And if you're a speech pathologist, you're interested in how we assess some of these areas, I've got some great play-based assessments that I can share with you. But how we intervene is also in play. So we can build flexibility in children. So we might give them a picture schedule like this, like here's a picture schedule for playing, for how we would play with dolls. But we can kind of swap that up, right? So today we're going to do this with it. You may have the child pre-plan their play goals. So you may have these pictures and they're not all in one page, but they're cut out and you can move them around and allow the child to pre-plan how they're going to play. I wish I could keep on talking. I love to use fairy tales with young kids. Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you can create a lot of wonderful, fun picture play schedules with them. The Three Pigs, of course, that's my fave. Okay, intervention strategy 2, mediated interactions, problem-solving dialogue. So I mentioned that there are some programs that you can buy that I Can Problem Solve as an evidence-based executive function, I guess, with intervention for preschoolers. They've got a school-age version as well. But what I like from this is this idea of dialoguing with the child. And when you identify the problem. So you may see a problem, like you see Sheldon grab a Nerf gun from Aiden, and it looks like the problem is Sheldon is grabbing the Nerf gun. The real problem is maybe Sheldon had a thought about that, like Aiden's playing with that Nerf gun too long. So if we're going to encourage the child to think flexibly about a problem, we have to understand what the problem is first and not give them what we think the problem is, right? So that involves that the child and the teacher are working together to identify what the problem is. Understanding what the real problem is based on what the child brings to the table. And the child, not the teacher, we're not solving the problem for them, but the child actually is doing that. I'm moving quickly. There's some more steps for that. Here are some children's problem solving books. I love to use books in lesson planning with kids. The Curious George, Ira Sleeps Over. This last thing that I want to share with you is the use of proactive statements. You guys are probably very familiar with social stories. I like the work of Karen Purvis. If you're interested, if you work with kids who've had trauma, Karen Purvis has some wonderful resources, but this is a kind and gentle social story that I created for my son, and it's something that we obviously it's highly used, but we create these scripts for kids and cycle through them quite frequently. So what does kind and gentle look like? Let's role play kind and gentle. What's kind and gentle look like when I'm playing with my friends? What's kind and gentle look like when I'm at home with my mommy? And there's some other examples: accept no, show respect, use your words, stick together. Those are some themes that Karen Purvis would recommend that we practice in scripts. There's a dragon at my school. I love that book. This dragon gets in all kinds of trouble. No David is another. Is there any amens for No David? I love No David. And it's a great book for inferencing, but it's also a great book for those kids who are always getting into trouble and having difficult times. And that's our kids with prenatal exposure. So I encourage that they will identify with David. And then I have this, what ideas do you have? I'm just looking at my time here. Am I good? What time is it? Okay, I'm good. Okay, so what ideas do you have? I'm so sorry that I talked for so long and so quickly that you might not have understood what I said, but hopefully you can get some information from some of the slides, and you're welcome to email me.
Oh, thank you so much, Lesley. This was fabulous. So much information, so much valuable information. No, I think I really appreciate you gave us the research, and then what can we do on a daily basis. And the fabulous thing is that all of those resources and all those ideas are in our slides, so everybody can go back to. I do want to, we've got about 10 minutes to open it up for people who might have questions. So just like with other areas, feel free to type those in the chat, You're welcome to unmute if you want to ask questions that way as well. To see while people are thinking up their questions, there was a lot. So Steph Weber says, I love the work of Karen Purvis. And then Michelle Raleigh-Roberts saying another term is collaborative problem solving. So, and there's a lot of evidence for that approach with kiddos with strong wills and aggression. Yeah, and so Karen Purvis group also touts a redo opportunity for kids when they need a chance to stop, slow down, and practice the behavior.
I do have a quick question, Lesley, and how you navigate with families who, I'll have a lot of families come to me and say, well, the speech language pathologist told me to talk, talk, talk all day long. But my concern is that the talking all day long is what you described as kind of, I can't remember the word you used, but basically like dictating to your kids what to do all day long is not what you're talking about.
Right.
Correct. And so could you talk through how you might share with families how to better narrate the day and build vocabulary without it being kind of giving demands all day?
That's a very good point. And I think that some of the things that, my experience of working with children and families in early intervention has been that if I provide examples of what I mean, instead of just saying, like talk, I want you to talk, but like, here's a very explicit way that I want you to talk to your child. And I think pointing out exactly what you said, Steph, about making sure that when we're talking or when we're interacting with the family, that we explicitly say, this is not the kind of talking we want. The kind of talking we want is actually more about narrating the day, not giving direction. And so narrating the day would be, and then give an example of, I'm putting on your shoe. Ooh, this sock looks pretty. Is that sock warm for you? Tell me what happened. So we can give some examples to the parent in that way, because I feel like you're right. When we tell parents and we give them instructions, talk is what that means a variety of things. So we have to be very explicit with families about what that means, and providing specific examples can be useful. And I like, and I didn't get to this, I'm sorry, I'm gonna shut up. You were like, okay, you answered my question, but I like this idea of this negative practice, right? So this is what I do this with children too. This is not what to do, but this is what to do, right? So the same thing goes with families, this is not how I want you to talk, but this is. And so it gives them that framework. Yeah.
I really like that idea of narrating the day, and I see it very closely tied to what Becky Bailey calls noticing, which is about building the relationship between the parent and the child, as well as vocabulary. But kind of being the play-by-play announcer for what the child's doing. So, oh, you found your sock. Oh, you just got it over your left foot. Now where's the one for your right foot? You found it. It's blue too. That kind of stuff. And so that, that's connecting with the child, as well as providing that language in a very natural, drill-like way, right? So the other thing is, I'm so glad you spent so much time on executive function. I just think it's so important at so many levels, and I love the way you connected to language development. And it brought me back to something that we didn't say when our group was talking about reporting out on Michelle's case, that one of the things we did mention was giving this child plenty of choices, so that it wasn't dictated to him necessarily what was going to happen, but you can do this or you can do that, both of which are acceptable. So then he has to problem solve that. That wires his brain towards that executive function state, that prefrontal cortex, and then helps to support that self-regulation we talked about. So this kind of, that executive function support, I think, was really be important for Michelle to think about ways that she offers that to her son too. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. How about others? Any questions?
I had a quick question about the kind and gentle social story. Could you give an example of that?
Oh, sorry, I lost my mouse. So I was still trying to find it. So you said the kind and gentle social story. So so this is Sheldon today, kind and gentle. Hi, my name's Sheldon. I love to be silly. This is one of my schools. I won't go through that, but My friends and I have fun playing in the classroom. My hands get to have fun too. I clap with my hands. I touch cool things with my hands. Sometimes I get angry. I want to push or scratch my friends with my hands. This makes my friends very sad. This is obviously, just a social story about being kind and gentle. I will try my best to use kind and gentle hands. This is safe. I can be kind and gentle. And then I give very specific examples when I share my toys, when I play with my friends. So in our own home, reading this, I won't read the whole thing to you, but I can send you the script if you're interested. But in my own home, we would go through role playing with kind and gentle too. And I mentioned the negative practice. So I might have, I might have a transformer. He's big, right? Don't ask me why I have a transformer next to my desk, but I might have him, and then I might have Batman, right? And so we're practicing, how would kind and gentle look like with the transformers talking to one another? And then how would it not look like? And it's very specific things that around what situations have happened in Sheldon's day, right? So let's reenact that. Let's do kind and gentle instead of flipping over the sensory table. What's the kind and gentle approach there, So, and bringing in, the role playing piece with the positive, negative, and positive role playing with it. Does that make sense? So Karen Purvis would say, you need to do it with your social story, your proactive script, but you also need to do it with role play. And in a time that is not, so I would not have Sheldon, if Sheldon just flipped over the sensory table, it's not the time for me to role play with Sheldon about that. I wait till he's in a regulated state, in a positive state to role play. Did that help, or did I just bring out my transformer for no reason? Okay.
Yeah. That's fabulous. And there's Alicia said, that's my house. I'm wondering if that was about the transformer next to the desk. Yeah, I think lots of that's going on right now. And Pam said, excellent speaker and diversity of expertise in the audience is very helpful. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so great to learn from all of you and be able to talk and just work with all of you.